The sun was setting low over the dusty streets of Copper Ridge, casting long shadows across the small town. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth and the quiet hum of life as it went on, unaffected by the tragedy unfolding in the town square. Two little girls stood on the steps of the town hall, clutching each other with their eyes wide and filled with confusion. Boone, the older sister at 8 years old, and Hope, her 6-year-old sibling, bore the weight of the world on their small shoulders. A few feet away, the crowd that had gathered to watch was snickering. They pointed and whispered, their laughter cutting through the quiet like a knife. They were laughing at the girls, at the way they looked so lost, so out of place. The little sisters stood there in their faded dresses, their hair tangled and messy from the long journey they had just endured. Their hands clutched tightly to each other, as if the world would crumble around them if they let go. "Your mama's been sold," a voice had said earlier, one of the town's wealthy ranchers, his tone dripping with mockery. "You girls better get used to the idea that life's going to be different from now on." The words had hit them like a blow. Mama, the only family they had ever known, was gone, sold to the highest bidder. And now, these strangers in the town square, these people who had never shown them kindness, were laughing. Laughter that stung, that made their hearts feel heavy with confusion and fear. They had never understood the business of selling people, why it happened, or who made the decisions. All they knew was that Mama had always taken care of them, and now she was gone, and they were alone. But there was one voice in the crowd that stood out, a deep, gravelly voice that silenced the others. It came from a man standing tall in the shadows of a nearby storefront. The rancher's eyes were cold, but there was something about the way he looked at the girls, something that made them stop shivering, if only for a moment. "You two look like you're in need of a home," the rancher said, his voice soft yet firm. "Come on now, follow me." The girls didn't know what to do. They had never seen this man before, but something about his words, his tone, made them trust him, even if just a little. He walked toward them, his boots making quiet, crunching sounds in the gravel as he moved. There was something about him, his posture, the way he carried himself, that made him seem important, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The rancher stopped just a few feet away from them, his eyes scanning the girls carefully, taking in their dirt-streaked faces and the sadness in their eyes. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I've got a place for you." The words hung in the air like a promise. But the promise didn't bring comfort. Instead, the girls felt a strange unease growing inside them, a feeling they couldn't quite explain. They didn't know who this man was or what he wanted, but the offer of a home, after everything they'd been through, seemed almost too good to be true. Boone, who had always been the braver of the pair, looked up at him with wide eyes. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice trembling. The rancher's face remained unreadable. "Nothing but a roof over your heads," he replied. "No strings attached. Just come with me." Hope clutched her older sister's hand, her small fingers trembling in fear. But she, too, felt the strange pull of this man's words. "Are you sure?" Hope asked. "Are you sure we're not going to be sold again?" The rancher's gaze softened for a moment, and he nodded slowly. "I'm sure," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "You could trust me. Come on, I'll take care of you." For a moment, the world outside seemed to fade away. The girls exchanged a brief glance, their eyes searching each other's faces for reassurance. And then, almost as if it was the only choice left, they nodded. They would go with the rancher to wherever he was taking them. The rancher turned and began to walk, and the little girls followed him, their small feet stumbling slightly as they tried to keep up. As they moved through the streets, Boone couldn't help but wonder what had just happened. The people around them still whispered and laughed, but the rancher was different. His presence, although intimidating at first, had a strange sort of authority that made the girls feel, for the first time since Mama had been sold, that maybe, just maybe, they would be okay. But as they walked farther from the town square and deeper into the outskirts of Copper Ridge, the girls couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change forever. The rancher hadn't said much. but his silence spoke volumes. He knew something about their mama, something important that the girls didn't understand yet. And as they crossed the threshold of the ranch, Boone knew that she would soon learn the truth, whether she was ready for it or not. As Boone and Hope followed the rancher down the dusty path that led away from Copper Ridge, they couldn't help but glance over their shoulders. The town, once their entire world, now felt like a distant memory, a place they had no control over. The laughter and the mocking faces still lingered in their minds, and with each step, they felt more detached from everything they had known. The rancher led them through a rusted gate that creaked as it swung open. Beyond it, the land stretched out like an endless sea of dry grass and scattered patches of scrub. The property was vast, far larger than anything the sisters had imagined. It seemed to go on forever, with the distant silhouette of the ranch house rising up against the fading evening sky. It was a sprawling place, with no signs of life besides the occasional whinny of a horse or the flutter of birds in the trees. The silence was unnerving. "Here we are," the rancher said, stopping in front of a modest house that looked like it had seen better days. The wooden frame was weathered, the paint peeling in places, but it was still standing strong, tucked away in the quiet of the land. The girls stood at the doorstep, unsure of what to expect next. "You'll be safe here," the rancher added, his voice steady but devoid of warmth. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke, as if he wasn't quite telling them everything. The girls exchanged a nervous look. Boone, at 8 years old, had never been one to show fear, but this place was different. She could feel the weight of the air, heavy with secrets. It was as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. The rancher opened the door with a deliberate slowness, as if to give them time to take in the scene. Inside, the house was simple but neat. A small wooden table sat in the center of the room, surrounded by mismatched chairs. A fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The warmth was a welcome contrast to the chill of the evening air. "You can sit and rest here for a while," the rancher said, gesturing toward the table. "I'll get you some food." The girls hesitated before walking inside. They had been through so much already, and this place, while not exactly inviting, seemed like a refuge compared to the harshness of the outside world. They sat down at the table, their fingers nervously tracing the grain of the wood. Boone glanced at Hope, who looked even more anxious than she felt. "What do you think?" Boone whispered. "I don't know," Hope replied, her voice small. "I'm scared, Boone. What if he's lying?" "I don't know either," Boone admitted, her heart heavy with doubt. "But right now, we don't have any choice. He's the only one who's offering us something. We'll figure it out." The rancher returned moments later with a simple meal, bread, cheese, and some dried meat. It wasn't much, but the girls were too hungry to care. They ate in silence, their minds filled with questions they couldn't ask. As they finished eating, the rancher spoke again, his voice softer now, as if the walls of the house had given him a sense of security. "Your mama, she wasn't just any woman," he began, his eyes shifting between the sisters as if measuring their reactions. "She had a history, a past, a history that ties her to this place." Boone stiffened, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" The rancher's gaze hardened, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not going to lie to you. Your mama, she came here to escape something. She worked with me for a while, helping with the land. She had her reasons for staying quiet, but she knew exactly what she was doing. Your mama was no fool." Boone's mind raced. Escape? Help? What was he talking about? They had never known anything about their mama's past, only that she had always been there, taking care of them, loving them, providing for them the best she could. The thought that she had been hiding something from them, something so serious, was too much to take in all at once. "Why are you telling us this now?" Boone asked, her voice trembling with frustration. "Why didn't you tell us before?" The rancher sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that your mama made choices. She made deals, and now Those choices are yours to make. What choices? Hope whispered, her eyes wide with confusion. The rancher didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the window and peered out at the land stretching beyond the house. His silhouette was framed by the dying light of the day, casting him in shadow. "You'll understand soon enough," he said, almost to himself. "This place, this ranch, it's more than it seems. And so is your mama." Boone felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What was he implying? And why was he being so cryptic about it? She felt a knot form in her stomach, a feeling of unease that she couldn't shake. The rancher turned back to face them, his eyes hardening once more. "There's something hidden here, something your mama knew about, and I think it's time you found out what it is." His words hung in the air like a challenge. Boone's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just about a place to stay. This wasn't just about surviving. There was something much bigger at play here. The rancher's words were laced with the promise of a dangerous truth, one that he wasn't ready to reveal fully just yet. But as the girls sat there, unsure of what was coming next, they both felt it. The weight of the secrets the rancher was keeping, and the sense that this place, their new home, would change their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The following days passed in a blur. The ranch was quiet, almost too quiet. Boone and Hope woke each morning to the soft chirping of birds outside their window and the distant neighing of horses. It was peaceful, but it felt strange to them. There was something about the silence that made the air feel heavy, as if it was holding a secret, one that was just waiting to be uncovered. Boone, at 8, had spent her days helping around the house, doing small chores that kept her busy. Hope, still quiet and withdrawn at 6, mostly kept to herself, her wide eyes always darting around the ranch, never quite resting. They both knew something was off. There were too many unanswered questions, too many things they didn't understand about the ranch, their mama's past, and the rancher's involvement in it all. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Boone decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was being hidden from them. The rancher had said so little about their mama's history, yet so much of it seemed to be tied to this place. She had to know more, even if it meant going behind the rancher's back. She found Hope sitting on the porch, staring out at the sprawling land before them. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and her face was filled with a mixture of confusion and worry. Boone sat down beside her, feeling the rough texture of the wooden planks beneath her. "What do you think about all this?" Boone asked, her voice low. Her sister turned her head, her eyes wide. "I don't know, Boone. It feels wrong, like we're supposed to be here, but we don't belong, like we're just waiting for something bad to happen." Boone nodded in agreement. "I feel the same way. There's something strange about this place, something the rancher isn't telling us. We need to know more about Mama's past here." Hope's eyes widened. "But Boone, what if we're not supposed to know? What if it's better if we just stay quiet and do what he says?" Boone shook her head. "I can't do that. I need to understand. I need to know what's really going on here." That evening, after the rancher had gone to bed, Boone made her move. She slipped quietly out of the house, careful not to wake Hope or the rancher. The moon was full, casting a pale light over the ranch as she made her way toward the barn. It was one of the few places on the property she hadn't explored yet, and something told her that if there was any clue to their mama's past, it might be hidden there. The barn loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. Boone took a deep breath before stepping inside, the wooden door creaking under her weight. The scent of hay and leather filled her nostrils, and she squinted into the shadows. The barn was empty, save for a few hay bales stacked in the corner and some old tools leaning against the wall. But as she moved deeper into the barn, something caught her eye, a wooden chest tucked away in a far corner behind a stack of crates. It was old, covered in dust and cobwebs, as though it had been forgotten for years. Boone's heart raced as she approached it, her fingers trembling with anticipation. She knelt beside the chest and examined it carefully. There was a lock on the front, but it didn't seem like it had been opened in a long time. Boone's curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed a rusty old crowbar from the corner and pried it open. The lock snapped with a sharp crack, and the chest creaked open slowly. Inside, Boone found what she was looking for: papers. Lots of them, all stacked neatly, as if someone had taken great care to keep them organized. She picked up the first piece of paper and began to read. The writing was faint but legible, the ink faded with age. As she read through the papers, she felt her pulse quicken. They were records, documents detailing the transactions between her mama and the rancher. Boone's eyes widened as she skimmed the pages, each one revealing a deeper and darker connection between her mama and the rancher. There were mentions of debts, secret agreements, and an ongoing arrangement that had lasted for years. Her mama had been working for the rancher long before she had met Boone and Hope. One document stood out to her, a letter written by her mama, addressed to someone named Sterling. It was dated just a few months before their mama had been sold. Boone's hand shook as she read the letter aloud to herself. "Sterling, I cannot keep this secret any longer. The mine is real, and I can no longer keep it hidden. The silver is there, under the cabin, and I have been mining it in secret for years. If anyone finds out, it will all be over. You know what I'm talking about. This is our only chance. Do not let anyone know." Boone's heart skipped a beat. The mine. The rancher had been involved in a silver mine all along. Her mama hadn't just been some simple woman living on a ranch. She had been part of something much bigger, something dangerous. But just as Boone was about to read further, she heard footsteps outside the barn. She froze, the papers clutched tightly in her hands. Her heart pounded in her chest. She quickly shoved the papers back into the chest and slammed it shut, hiding the crowbar where she had found it. The door to the barn creaked open, and Boone barely had time to hide in the shadows before the rancher stepped inside. He paused, glancing around the barn, his sharp eyes scanning the dark corners. For a moment, it felt like he could see right through her. "Boone," he called out softly, his voice steady but carrying a hint of something colder. "What are you doing here?" Boone's breath caught in her throat. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Just looking around. I couldn't sleep." The rancher didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press further. He just nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. "You'd better get back to the house. It's late." Boone nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As she stepped past him and into the cool night air, she couldn't shake the feeling that the rancher knew exactly what she had been doing. He wasn't stupid, and now neither was she. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the hills, casting long, golden rays across the ranch. Boone had barely slept. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about the document she had found in the chest, about the silver mine, her mama's secret, and the rancher's role in it all. The more she thought about it, the more questions surfaced. She couldn't let it go. She had to find out more. After breakfast, when the rancher was busy tending to the horses, Boone took Hope aside. "We need to go to the cabin," she whispered, glancing around to make sure they weren't being watched. "I found something last night. Something that'll change everything." Hope, still uneasy and uncertain about the ranch, nodded silently. She trusted Boone, even if she didn't fully understand why they had to dig deeper. The rancher's hospitality had felt too good to be true from the beginning. And now, with each passing day, the sisters were starting to see the cracks in his seemingly perfect world. Together, they made their way toward the cabin, the path leading them past rows of tall, brittle grass and twisted trees that seemed to stretch toward the sky like skeletons. The cabin stood alone, far from the rest of the ranch, a structure that looked more like a forgotten relic than a home. The porch sagged under the weight of years of neglect, and the walls, once sturdy, had begun to lean inwards, as though the house itself was slowly giving up. When they reached the front door, Boone hesitated. The brass key, which had been so smooth and cold in her hand, now felt like it weighed a ton. She wondered if unlocking this door would open more than just the physical space of the cabin. Would it open a door to the truth about her mama, about the rancher, and about what had really been going on here for all those years. With a deep breath, she turned the key in the lock, and the door creaked open. Dust hung thick in the air, and the smell of old wood and mold filled her nostrils. The inside was dim, with only a few weak beams of sunlight cutting through the cracks in the walls. The single room was empty except for the fireplace, a small table, and an old wooden bed frame. Everything looked like it had been left in a hurry, as if the cabin had once been lived in, but now was abandoned, left to decay. "Look at this," Boone whispered to Hope, pointing to the floor by the fireplace. The stone hearth was covered in dust, but something about it seemed off. She knelt down and ran her fingers across the stones, noticing that some of them felt looser than the others. Hope bent down next to her, eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it, Boone?" "I think there's something hidden here," Boone said, her voice barely a whisper. "Something that the rancher doesn't want us to find." With renewed determination, she began prying at the loose stones, carefully lifting them from the fireplace one by one. Hope watched, biting her lip, unsure if they should be doing this. But Boone was too far gone now. She had already uncovered a part of the truth, and there was no turning back. As the last stone came loose, Boone's eyes widened. Beneath it was a small, dark opening, just big enough for a person to crawl through. She glanced to Hope, who stood frozen in place, a mix of fear and excitement written all over her face. "Do you think this is where the silver is?" Hope asked softly, her voice trembling. Boone didn't answer immediately. Instead, she crawled into the opening, feeling the cool air rush past her as she made her way into the small tunnel. It was narrow, dark, and cold, but Boone's heart was racing with anticipation. She had to know what lay beyond, what secrets her mama had kept hidden for so long. The tunnel stretched out before her, the walls rough with uneven stone. Boone's fingers scraped against the cold surface as she inched forward, Hope following closely behind. The air smelled musty, and the further they crawled, the darker it became. There were no lights down here, no windows to let in the sun, just darkness and silence. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the end of the tunnel. Boone's hands trembled as she reached for the small wooden door at the far end. The wood was rough to the touch, the grain worn down from years of use. She turned the handle and pushed the door open, revealing a small room, lit only by the faint glow of the sun coming through a tiny crack in the wall. Boone stepped inside, Hope following her into the dimly lit space. The room was much larger than the cabin above. Wooden beams supported the earth overhead, and shelves lined the walls, filled with old mining tools, maps, and charts. But what caught Boone's eye immediately were the silver bars stacked neatly along one wall, gleaming in the faint light. Her heart skipped a beat. It was true. The silver was real. And it was hidden here, beneath the cabin, for all these years. "This is it," Boone whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is what Mama was hiding." Hope's eyes widened in disbelief. But why? Why didn't she ever tell us about this? Boone didn't have an answer. All she knew was that this discovery changed everything. The rancher had known about this. Her mama had been mining silver all along, and now the secret was out. The question was, what did the rancher want with all of this? And why had he kept it from the girls? As Boone moved closer to the silver, she noticed something else. At the far end of the room, sitting on a wooden table, was a leather-bound journal. It looked old, the cover cracked and faded with age. Boone picked it up carefully, wiping away the dust that had settled on its surface. She opened the first page, and as her eyes scanned the writing, she realized that this was her mama's journal. The entries were written in her mama's familiar handwriting, documenting the mining process, the silver she had extracted, and the secret plan she had made with the rancher. Boone's hand shook as she read the final entry. "If anything happens to me, make sure the girls are taken care of. They can't know about the mine. Not yet. There's too much danger. But when the time comes, they'll understand." Boone closed the journal, her mind spinning with the weight of the discovery. The truth was finally starting to make sense, but it only raised more questions. Why had her mama kept this a secret? And why had the rancher gone to such lengths to hide it from them? Just as Boone stood up, ready to confront the rancher, she heard footsteps approaching from the tunnel entrance. Her heart raced. It was him. The rancher had found them. The air inside the underground chamber felt thick with tension as Boone stared at the silver bars, her fingers still trembling around her mama's journal. Every breath seemed to echo in the silence, a harsh reminder of the discovery she had just made. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about secrets, about hidden truths that had been buried for years. And the more she uncovered, the more she realized that her mama had been living a life far different from the one she had let on. Boone's mind raced as she glanced at Hope, whose face was pale with disbelief. The reality of what they had just found, what their mama had been involved in, was sinking in. This was more than just silver. It was the key to everything, to the rancher's past, to their mama's decisions, and to the future that lay ahead of them. The sisters couldn't hide from the truth any longer. It was all laid bare in front of them. "We need to go back to the house," Boone said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's time we confront him." Hope nodded, her wide eyes still filled with shock. But there was a flicker of something else there, too. Determination. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They couldn't ignore the reality of what had been happening under their very noses. The two girls hurried out of the chamber and into the dark tunnel. The narrow path felt even more suffocating now, as though the earth itself was pressing in on them, urging them to stay quiet, to leave the truth buried deep. But Boone wasn't going to let that happen. Not after everything they had uncovered. As they emerged from the cabin, Boone glanced nervously over her shoulder, half expecting to see the rancher standing there, watching them. But there was no sign of him. The land around the cabin was still and quiet, the only sounds coming from the distant rustle of wind through the trees. For a moment, it felt as if nothing had changed, but Boone knew better. They made their way back to the house, their steps quick and deliberate. Boone's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. The rancher knew about the mine. He had known for years. The question was, why had he kept it a secret? And what did he want with the silver? When they reached the house, the door was ajar, as though the rancher had been expecting them. Boone felt a chill creep up her spine as she stepped inside, Hope right behind her. The rancher was standing in front of the fireplace, his back to them, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You've been snooping around," he said without turning around, his voice flat, almost tired. "I should have known better than to leave you two alone." Boone clenched her fists at her sides, trying to steady her breathing. "You've been lying to us," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "You knew about the silver all along. You knew what Mama was doing." The rancher finally turned to face them, his expression unreadable. "Your Mama was never one to speak of her past. She made her choices, and I made mine. That's how this world works. What did you do to her?" Boone's voice cracked as she took a step forward. "Why did you keep us in the dark? You didn't just take care of us. You took advantage of us." The rancher's eyes narrowed, but there was a hint of something else in his gaze. Regret, perhaps? Or is it something darker? Boone couldn't tell, but she could feel the weight of his silence. It was as if he were trying to figure out how much to reveal. "She came to me for help," the rancher said, his voice softer now, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "She needed money, and I offered it. But she didn't just take the money. She had her own reasons for keeping the silver secret. She didn't trust anyone, not even me. Not at first." Boone felt her stomach twist with confusion. "What do you mean? Where's she hiding?" The rancher took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the years had finally caught up with him. She wasn't just mining silver for herself. She was building something. She knew that this mine, this silver, was worth more than anything either of us could have imagined. But there were people who would kill to get their hands on it. So she kept it hidden, kept it from the world. He paused, staring at the floor as if the truth had finally become too much for him to bear. I promised her I'd protect it. But when she died, when she was sold, I couldn't keep that promise. I couldn't keep you safe. The revelation hit Boone like a punch to the gut. Her mama hadn't just been living a quiet life on the ranch. She had been involved in something much bigger, something dangerous. And now, the rancher was caught up in it too, whether he liked it or not. What does this mean for us? Boone asked, her voice barely a whisper. What do we do now? The rancher's eyes flickered with a mix of sorrow and guilt. I don't know, he said quietly. All I know is that your mama was right to hide the silver. She kept it from the wrong people. And now those people are coming. They're not going to stop until they find it. Boone's heart raced, her mind spinning with the weight of what he was saying. It wasn't just about a hidden fortune anymore. It was about survival. If people were after the silver, if they were willing to kill for it, then the sisters had no choice but to fight back. You've known about this all along, Boone said, her anger boiling over. And you've been using us. All this time, you've been using us. The rancher didn't deny it. He didn't have to. His silence spoke volumes. But I won't let them take it, he finally said, his voice low but firm. I won't let them take what your mama fought for. Boone stood in the doorway, her chest tightening with the weight of the truth. The rancher had known. He had known all along, and now, with the silver mine exposed, the fight was far from over. You should have told us the truth, Boone said, her voice shaking with frustration and determination. But it's too late for that now. The rancher nodded, his face grim. You're right. And now we have to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Boone's mind raced with the possibilities. The rancher's admission had set everything in motion. The silver wasn't just a treasure, it was a target. And now the sisters were caught in the middle of a deadly game they never asked to play. The rancher's confession hung heavily in the air, settling between them like a dark cloud. Boone and Hope stood silently, absorbing the truth that had just been laid bare before them. Their mama's secret life, the silver mine, the promises, and the betrayal. It was all too much to process in one moment. Yet, Boone knew deep down that there was no going back. The pieces of their mother's life, and their own, were finally coming together. But now the real question was what to do next. The rancher's eyes flickered toward the fireplace, his mind clearly elsewhere. The people I've been trying to protect you from, he said quietly, breaking the silence. They're dangerous. They know about the mine, and they know that it's still there. We won't be safe unless we act fast. Boone's stomach twisted with fear. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but now the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. How do we stop them? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. The rancher turned back to her, his face grim. We'll have to fight. We can't just run. Your mama didn't hide that silver for nothing. She built something here, something valuable. But if we don't protect it, we'll lose everything. Boone felt the weight of his words press down on her shoulders. The life she had known was gone, replaced by a world of danger and secrecy. But she wasn't going to let fear control her. Her mama had made sure she was prepared for something bigger, something more challenging than just surviving. And now, Boone was ready to face it. I'm not running, Boone said firmly, looking the rancher in the eye. I'm staying. Whatever it takes, I'm staying here. We're going to protect what Mama left behind. Hope, who had remained quiet for most of the conversation, finally spoke up. Her voice was soft but determined. I'm with you, Boone. If we have to fight to protect Mama's secret, then we will. Boone placed a hand on Hope's shoulder, offering her a smile of reassurance. They had always been a team, and now, more than ever, they would have to stick together. Their mama had left them a legacy, one they couldn't afford to lose, not to the rancher's past or to the dangerous people who were closing in. The rancher nodded slowly, a faint glimmer of approval in his eyes. You're braver than I gave you credit for, he said, his voice softening for the first time. Your mama would have been proud of you both. Boone didn't know what came next. She didn't know how they were going to stop the people who were after the silver, or if they were strong enough to face what was ahead. But she knew one thing. She wouldn't let fear control her. Not after everything they had been through. The legacy of their mama was too important, and now it was time to fight for it. Over the next few days, Boone and the rancher made plans. They worked together to fortify the cabin, preparing for whatever came next. The sisters didn't rest, but instead focused on securing their future, knowing that there were people out there who would stop at nothing to get their hands on the silver. The rancher, despite his past, turned out to be an invaluable ally, teaching Boone the skills she would need to protect herself and Hope. Boone's mind often returned to the journal her mama had kept, the one filled with entries about the silver mine, the risks, and the hidden power it held. Her mama had known the dangers, had known that the mine would attract the wrong kind of people. But she had also known that it was too valuable to leave untouched. It was a treasure, but it was also a curse. One evening, as they sat around the fire, the rancher spoke up again. "We've done what we can to prepare. But you need to understand something," he said, his voice low. "Even with all the planning in the world, there's no guarantee we'll be able to hold them off. The men coming for the silver, they're ruthless. If they want it, they'll take it, no matter what." Boone nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She had known that their situation was dangerous, but hearing it from the rancher's lips made it all the more real. She looked at Hope, who was sitting quietly next to her. In her young eyes, Boone saw fear but also determination. They weren't going to let anyone take what was rightfully theirs. Not the rancher, and certainly not the men who had been hunting their mama's legacy. "We'll be ready," Boone said quietly, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "We'll fight." The rancher gave her a nod of approval, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're ready for this, Boone. I see it now." The next few days were spent in preparation. Boone and Hope learned everything they could from the rancher. They practiced with weapons, they learned the land, and they made sure that every possible escape route was mapped out. But deep down, Boone knew that it wasn't just about fighting the people who came for the silver. It was about reclaiming what had been lost and protecting their mama's memory. The silver wasn't just a treasure, it was their heritage, and they were going to protect it. When the day came, they were ready. The sound of horses' hooves echoed in the distance as the men who had been searching for the silver finally arrived. Boone stood at the ready, her heart pounding in her chest, her grip firm on the weapon in her hand. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The battle wasn't just for the silver, it was for everything their mama had worked for, everything she had sacrificed. The rancher stood beside them, his expression hard as stone. "Remember," he said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "This is for your mama, for your future." As the men approached, Boone and Hope exchanged a look, one of fierce determination, a bond forged in the fires of the truth they had uncovered. No matter what happened next, they would face it together. They would fight for the legacy of their mama, for the truth of what she had left behind, and for their place in this world. The rancher stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he prepared to face the men who had come to take everything from them. And Boone stood tall, ready for whatever came next. The battle was fierce, but Boone, Hope, and the rancher were prepared. The men who came for the silver were ruthless, just as the rancher had warned, but they underestimated the determination of the two young sisters and the resolve of the man who had once failed their mother but was now determined to make things right. The rancher had taught Boone and Hope how to use the terrain to their advantage, setting up traps around the cabin and using the narrow passages of the ranch to confuse the intruders. Boone, despite her young age of 8, showed incredible bravery. She stood her ground, using the skills the rancher had taught her to keep the men at bay. Hope, though only 6, stayed close to her sister, her small hand steady as she helped reload weapons and signal warnings. The rancher fought with a ferocity that surprised even himself, driven by a need to protect the girls and honor the promise he had made to their mommy years ago. The fight lasted through the night, with the sounds of gunfire and shouts echoing across the ranch. The intruders, expecting an easy victory, were caught off guard by the sisters' resilience and the rancher's strategic planning. One by one, the men were driven back, some fleeing into the darkness, others unable to continue the fight. By dawn, the ranch was quiet once more, the threat vanquished. Boone and Hope stood together, panting and exhausted but victorious. The silver mine, their mama's legacy, was safe. The rancher, bruised but unbroken, looked at the girls with a newfound respect. "You did it," he said, his voice hoarse but filled with pride. "You protected what your mama fought so hard to keep." Boone nodded, her chest swelling with a mix of relief and determination. "We did it for her," she said softly, glancing at Hope, who smiled back, her eyes shining with tears of both sorrow and triumph. In the days that followed, the rancher worked with the sisters to secure the silver mine properly. They decided to keep its existence a secret, knowing that its value could still attract danger. With the rancher's guidance, they used a portion of the silver to repair the ranch, turning it into a thriving home. The old house was fixed, the peeling paint replaced with fresh colors, and the land began to flourish with new crops and livestock. Boone and Hope found a new sense of purpose on the ranch. Boone, with her sharp mind and fearless spirit, took on responsibilities that belied her young age, helping the rancher manage the land. Hope, with her quiet strength, found joy in tending to the animals and planting a small garden, a tribute to their mama's love for growing things. The rancher, no longer just a mysterious figure from their past, became a guardian, a mentor, and, in time, a family. The sisters never forgot their mama or the sacrifices she made. They kept her journal close, reading her words whenever they needed strength, a reminder of the legacy they had fought to protect. The ranch became their sanctuary, a place where they could heal from the pain of their past and build a future filled with hope. As the years passed, Boone and Hope grew up on the ranch, their bond unbreakable. The rancher, once weighed down by guilt, found redemption in watching the girls thrive. Together, they turned the ranch into a beacon of resilience, a testament to their mama's courage and their own unyielding spirit. The silver mine remained hidden, a secret they guarded fiercely, but it was no longer a curse. It was a symbol of their triumph, a reminder that they had faced the darkness and come out stronger. And so, Boone and Hope, alongside the rancher, started a new life, one built on the foundation of their mama's love and the strength they found within themselves. The ranch was no longer just a place. It was their home, their legacy, and their future.